Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Sushan.
This week's Where You At podcast takes us out to the Beehive State of Utah. We're going to be talking to a guy who started off his career as a sports writer. Then he made the transition. He is now the communications and marketing director for the city of St. George, Utah. He attended San Diego State late 90s, early 2000s. He's been with his current position for about 6.5 years. He may not write sports, but he remains a diehard San Diego State fan, especially men's basketball. David, my friend, welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Sush, it's always great to get a chance to talk with you and hang out. So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, so David and I did not overlap at San Diego State. I think the first time that we met was at a Daily Aztec reunion in the parking lot of the Murph in the late 90s. I think you might have still been a student or something like that. I still have the photo of it. And so it's been cool, even though we didn't go to school at the same time, just to see your career and be able to keep up with you all these years.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We met, it was in June of 1999. I was about a month short of 21. So it was fun. I could drink in the parking lot, but afterwards, when the party moved the McGregors, sadly, I was not able to attend. So I always wish I was born about a month or so earlier, so I could join that great crew there. But it was awesome, and getting to know you over the years. Of course, when you were in the Bay Area, I remember you came down one time to visit, and we had a good talk there at the old basement of the band building at the Daily Aztec. And of course, I think the last time we saw each other was at the Final Four. Yeah,
there's something about the Daily Aztec where it doesn't matter when you went to school there, there's just like this bond. So let's actually start there, because you were a business administration and management major, but you end up over at the Daily Aztec. So tell us about sort of your college experience at SDSU and what you think you were going to do when you were these ages.
Yeah. So it was funny. I think a lot of people that have met me from my Daily Aztec experience on would never believe that I was super shy, painfully shy when I was younger, when I was in high school. And originally I wanted to be an accountant because I liked numbers, and I thought that you wouldn't have to go talking to a lot of people, and and it just seemed like it was a good major to do. And so I went to Grossmont College for 2 years and did all my lower division stuff there, and was ready to go in the fall of '98 for San Diego State. And during this time, I was working, I was going to school, and I'd hear from all my friends about what a great college experience they were having. People that were going to Tulane, they're going to Arizona, they're going to USC, all people that I work with at SeaWorld from time to time. Mostly the out-of-towners were there for the summer, obviously, because they're in school the other times. But and I got really jealous. I was like, man, I'm just not having the college experience. I'm commuting to school, coming home, and that's it. And so when I went to San Diego State in the fall of '98, I kind of made a promise to myself. I was like, you got to get involved in something. You got to do something extracurricular. College only happens once, well, for most people, but the true college experience usually only happens once. And so I happened to be at a San Diego State baseball game the spring. I've always loved newspapers. Even before I was in newspapers, I always loved reading them, particularly the sports section. I devoured sports sections even before I started writing. And I saw an ad in the Daily Aztec sports section, and it said, "If you love sports and like to write, we've got a job for you." And I was thinking, hey, that's me, because I did pretty good on my essays in school. Got A's in English, in high school and then in college. And my parents were always saying, hey, you should go into writing. You're really good at that. I'm like, nah. I couldn't imagine a career like that. because I just thought, oh, writing, writing books or whatever. And I couldn't see myself doing that. And so I went in to be an accountant. And I get to San Diego State. I start writing for the Daily Aztec. And I'm also in the upper division accounting program. Well, for anybody who has any experience in the upper division accountancy program there, it is not for the faint of heart. In the fall of 98, I had to take a 6-unit class. So 2 hours, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That 6-unit class basically felt like a 16-unit class. There was all kinds of reading. I mean, they had like 5 books. It was just ridiculous. I had to read like 200 pages in between each class. And I fell behind. Of course, the sports fans out there will know what was happening in San Diego in the fall of 98. Well, the Padres were making a run. They were having their best regular season ever. And I'm a diehard Padre fan. And so I was kind of caught up in that. And so naturally, my grades kind of went into the toilet. And about a month in, the accountancy chair, she came in, talked to the class, and she said, you know what? I applaud all of you who are in this major. It is not for the faint of heart. And, it's done that way because we want to weed out the people that don't really want to be accountants. And then it kind of hit me. I don't really want to be an accountant. And so I didn't know what I wanted to be, but at the time I was really liking sports writing. I started when David Hanna was the sports editor. Arturo Garcia was the assistant sports editor. He was one of your pupils. I think your last semester and his first semester kind of coincided, and was learning a lot from them, having a lot of fun, hanging out there in the Daily Aztec office. And so that's kind of how it started. And it wasn't until I got towards the end of that first year and even into my second year at the Daily Aztec when I considered, hey, maybe this could be a good profession for me.
Other San Diego State memories, whether it's classroom, whether it's Daily Aztec, whether it's around the campus. You mentioned how you were missing out on that college experience. Give us more details about what San Diego State did, in particular to bring you out of the shell so that you're no longer the shy kid.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that being at the Daily Aztec was huge, and also dropping that accounting class was big because I went from 14 units to 8, so I had a lot of free time, and I loved just hanging out, smack talking with the guys about sports, flirting with the pretty girls there at the Daily Aztec, and there's a couple of moments that I thought were really cool early on. One was that first Halloween that I was there. I was invited to a party by the arts ladies, Jessica Yadigaran, who you had on one of your early podcasts, and Lisa Ricci. They were both running the arts and entertainment section. That was a precursor to the Tempo. It was called Tempo. It might still be called Tempo. I haven't checked lately, but they invited me to their house for a Halloween party. And I go, and I'm not even wearing a costume because I'm an idiot, or maybe I had something just lame, like a hat or a mask or whatever. But I just remember they're like so happy to see me, and I felt really welcomed. I felt like I was part of the crew. Here I am, this new kid, just a lowly staff writer at the Daily Aztec. They're editors, they're section editors, right? And they just embraced me with open arms, and I started getting included in things. Including later that school year, I made the first of my 3 trips to the California Intercollegiate Press Association conferences, banquets, whatever you want to call it. That one is probably a little too spicy for this podcast to tell you exactly what went on in that one. Those were a lot of fun over the years, and including in 2000, this was in it was Claremont, California. And that's when we won the best sports section. It was the first time we had won it, probably since you were at the helm, or maybe 96 afterwards, when I think it was Elizondo and maybe Quist was those guys. I don't know who was at the helm, but it was really cool to win the title that year, and just all the fun that ensued with SEPAs, which you're well aware of.
Oh yes, SEPA, so much fun, so many memories. Best served not on this podcast, indeed.
Yeah, that's right.
For the record, when I was sports editor, we did not win best section. However, One of my proudest moments when I was the editor in chief, we won best overall excellence.
Sweepstakes.
Yes, we won
Yeah.
that. Favorite stories that you wrote as a college student? Do any of them stand out, whether it's a game, a feature story, or just maybe even just like how you went about getting the story that stands out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the story I feel like was my breakthrough story when I was at San Diego State. My first year, I hesitate to look back on those articles because you're learning, you're doing the best you can. You're not very good at interviewing. You're not very good at keeping things tight. But I feel like my second year, so I was sports editor for 2 years, the 99-2000 school year and 2000-2001. I think in the first issue coming out of the winter break in 2000, I did a long story on Rahn Sheffield, who was there when you were there, and was the coaching track and field and cross country at San Diego State for many years, and actually was an athlete there himself. And I got to know him. My first beat was cross country. And I got to know him really well. The man was a quote machine. Like I'd leave his office, I'd just be laughing. It was like the best experience ever. He had quite a story to tell. He, back when he was working at, it was, oh my gosh, there was a company that made like aircraft materials, airplane materials. Anyway, he worked for that company, and apparently something happened. He had a kind of a grotesque injury, and it threatened to end his racing career. And so I wrote about that story, and I really took my time, really tried to get as many interviews as possible. And it turned out great. I can still remember getting a call from Ron the morning or the afternoon that came out. And Ron was just like, "Dave, you've got my girls all crying." Because it touched them that much. They didn't know that about their coach. Mm-hmm. And that was always kind of the cool thing about being a sports writer, was that you could tell the stories that the subject may not even tell some of their closest people in their lives. And you kind of you're the vessel for them to tell their story. And I loved it. So that was really kind of a breakthrough for me. I feel like it showed me what I could do if I put in that extra effort. If I really tried to convey the emotion of things and the human element. And so yeah, that was probably my favorite one to do at San Diego State.
Anytime you make family members cry, you did a good job with your story. Yeah. That is cool. That is very cool. So when you leave college, are you thinking like, okay, I'm going to be the next Ed Graney, Nick Canepa, Tom Krasovic? Like, what's your thoughts at the time in terms of what you were going to do? And we'll use that to kind of get into what you end up doing now.
So Ed Graney was probably my role model when I was at San Diego State. I got to know him when I covered football and men's basketball, and I loved how he wrote. I got to be honest, a lot of the things he used. Case in point, consider, and just the way he wrote his game stories were just mesmerizing. And there were times where, I would go to a football game and, I'd write the story. Of course, I had a lot more time than he did. He had deadline just breathing down his neck. He had to churn that thing out quick. Even if it was a day game, he still, had to get it written within a few hours. I had a whole extra day because we didn't print it until Monday. And there's some days where I'd be like, okay, I kicked his ass on this one. Like I know I wrote this better than him. And then I'd read his story and I'm like, oh man, he beat me yet again. He was, and of course, because he had been doing it for a number of years, had more time to devote to the beat. And so I looked at Ed and he was, he had a family, he had a wife and he was beginning to have kids. And I thought, well, that's, this is the kind of, I like to kind of follow his career arc. So he was the one that I kind of looked at. And I think a lot of us, once upon a time, thought we'd be columnists someday, that we'd be writing for Sports Illustrated or the New York Times Sporting News, and so that's kind of what I was looking to. And then, you get to the end of your senior year and reality hits that you gotta find a job, find a job somewhere and work your way up. You're not just gonna going to fall into a job at the UT. A lot of their jobs, they took 2 to 5 years experience to do that. And so I ended up in Logan, Utah. Now, did I know where Logan, Utah was before I saw the job opening? Nope, I did not. But I soon found out that's where Utah State was located. Utah State played in the Big West in those days. And I applied for the job, and they reached out and they wanted to fly me out there. And I remember calling Ed. I called Ed Graney up and I said, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'm doing a job interview up in Logan. What do you think?" And he told me, "Hey, this looks like a good opportunity for you. You can get some good clips. The Winter Olympics are going to be within the next year at the time, and there may be some opportunities there." And he's like, "Yeah, I think you should go. And if they offer you the job, you probably should take it. It'd be a great start for you." And so I did. In August of 2001, I drove up to Logan, Utah. The weather was absolutely perfect, which is not always the case. And when I went up on the interview, there was no snow on the mountain, on the Wellsville Mountains. There was no precursor of what was to come. I knew there was going to be snow. It's Utah, right? Utah's famous for its snow. Mm-hmm. But as I got there, and we had our first snow in October, and then we had the coldest winter in a lot of years. And here I am driving my 95 Corolla. It was quite a culture shock for me, for sure. One absolutely great thing happened within the first month of moving to Logan is I met the girl who would eventually become my wife.
Oh,
yeah. And so a lot of things, that kind of changed a lot of things, because originally I thought, I'd be there for a couple of years, get my experience, get my clips, move on to something bigger. So I ended up being there for 4.5 years. And my wife, Julie, she was actually a sports writer herself at the time. That's kind of how we met. She was the sports editor of the Utah Statesman. And so she, at a certain point, we realized we probably couldn't get jobs in the same newsroom, in the same department. And so she became a teacher, which is an awesome career move for her, added some stability. And so that's why we were there for about 4.5 years. And after a while, it became time to thaw out. And so was looking for jobs. And we found an opportunity in St. George, which is the exact opposite end of the state. Logan is in the north. St. George is in the south, just about 2 hours north of Las Vegas. And I thought that would be a good opportunity. And the job itself, it was pretty much just pagination. It was designing the paper. And I had asked, because the whole reason I got into sports writing was the writing. I didn't get in there to design pages. They said, there'll be opportunities to write, but mostly it would be pagination. I'm like, cool. So I started doing that. I find that you get a lot of, I don't know if you call it power, but a lot of responsibilities when you're on the desk. And within a year, I was actually promoted to sports editor based on the leadership that I took when I was doing pages, and the little bit of the innovation that we started doing with different designs. And so then I became sports editor, and I was sports editor for about 7 years. And I get married. We ended up having kids. We had 2 kids, David Jr. and Emma. And in 2014, I kind of reached a point where I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like be in sports. All the games are at night, so I'm working in the afternoon till 1 o'clock. And, when David Jr. was a baby, he was an awesome baby. He was kind of like me, a night owl,
Mm-hmm.
And so he wouldn't get up in the morning till 8:30, 9. And so that was a little rough for my wife, because she was up later with him, because he didn't get to bed till 9:30, 10. And so it wasn't so bad. But Emma was an early riser, so she would want to get up at 6:30 or 7. And I'm like, okay, I can't keep burning the candles at both ends. My son was in first grade at the time, so when he was at school, I was at home, and then when I went to work, he came home, so I wasn't seeing him as often. And so I was trying to figure out a way to get out of sports writing. And I looked for a few jobs outside of the industry. They didn't pan out. So I actually ended up getting a different job at the paper. I was the arts and entertainment editor for about basically about a year and a half or so, and it was really good. Instead of 5 nights a week, it was 2 nights a week, and so it was a lot different kind of work, a little less stressful, I would say. And even for a little bit of time, I was the interim editor as we had a leadership change. But everything kind of went a different direction on. It's my own personal January 6th, right? Because I remember it was January 6th, 2016, and I was called into a meeting, and the publisher, he called me in, and I didn't think anything of it. I walked in, and as soon as I turned the corner, I see the HR director and I see the editor, and they look like they haven't slept all night. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. And I was laid off. That was after about 14 and a half years full-time in the journalism business. I was laid off, and it actually turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.
Why is that? Why did it turn out? Oh, hold on. Before we get to that, I think, look, any jobs, but especially jobs in journalism, part of it is getting fired. It's getting laid off. It's getting furloughed. How you deal with rejection. Before we get into why it was the best, let's discuss emotion. Like, what's that like when you go home, you tell your wife and you're worried, how am I going to support my family? Let's get into those emotions, and then we'll transition to what is next.
Yeah, you bet. It was devastating at the time. It was something that it was the only thing I thought I knew how to do, is tell stories at a newspaper. Was I naive enough to think that I would make it till I was 65 in newspapers? Probably not. I had a feeling I was going to probably have to maybe pivot for a career change, and did a lot of great things, worked with a lot of awesome people. And, it was tough having to call my wife and tell her that I got laid off. Of course, it was great. She had a great job. And so I didn't have to worry about, health benefits, because I was already on her health benefits as it was, way better at the school district than at the newspaper level. But, I did a little bit of soul searching, right? Sort of similar to that Seinfeld episode when George is sitting down on the floor and Jerry's asking him what he's interested in, what he might want to do for a living.
Yes.
Because I quickly realized that, one, I wanted to stay in St. George. We had made lots of great friends. Our kids were involved in my daughter's starting to get involved in dance. My son was, playing a lot of sports and made a lot of friends. We lived in a great neighborhood with great people. And I was like, no, we're staying here. I'm not gonna ask my wife to leave her stable job so I can go find something that probably isn't even that stable, And so with that in mind, I realized that my full-time journalism career, at least at the moment, was going to be over. There was one other option in town. It was St. George News. And right now, 9 years later, St. George News is a really good, a really solid online only publication. They do a good job with the amount of things that they cover. But at the time, it was mostly, car crashes, really clickbait stuff. And I knew if I took a job there, I'd be taking a significant pay cut, and I wouldn't be the editor, and I would probably have to, work at all hours again, kind of be a little bit later in the day. And I was done with that, And so at that point, going to my Costanza moment, okay, I'm good at writing. I feel like I could tell a story. What else could I do? And I kind of figured on the PR, marketing, communications realm. I felt like that I knew a lot of people that were former journalists that were in this field, and I'd actually gotten a little bit of experience on a freelance basis. A buddy of mine had worked at Northwestern at the time, and he kicked me a lot of freelance articles that they were doing on their famous alums. And another guy that in Utah, he had the similar things for me to do. So I feel like I had a taste for the business. We all called it the dark side at the time. Mm-hmm. You may have done it too, but having been laid off from a newspaper and seeing how the PR world was, it seemed pretty well lit to me. It seemed it didn't seem too dark. And so I gave that a try, and I ended up catching on with a company called Sorensen Advertising. I was their PR director, a little small firm, and it was funny because I was with the Spectrum for 10 years. When Spectrum is a Gannett newspaper, and when they lay you off, they give you however many years you served, you get that number of weeks at full pay when you factor in the unemployment benefits. And so at 10 years, I had 10 weeks of full pay to figure it out. And I started at Sorensen in week 9. So I didn't lose any money. And the job I got at Sorensen actually a few grand more. And so it ended up being a really good thing for about 4 months until Sorensen sold the business. And so layoff number 2. So 2016 is just on fire, right? So that was, again, I had to call my wife and tell her that.
How many more times have you been laid off here?
That's it. Luckily, that was it.
Okay.
So far, only 2. But so then I kind of bounced around a little bit. I got a job for Bay Equity, which is a home loan company. I did marketing for them. Got that job pretty quickly, so I didn't even need to get unemployment benefits, luckily. And then from there, I worked at the Chamber of Commerce. I sold memberships. I was their membership director. And I hadn't been in sales in 20 years since I worked for Cutco knives. That sounds familiar if you know any friends that work for Cutco and sold knives. But so I did the chamber. And then luckily enough, the city of St. George had just started a new communications and marketing position. And I was fortunate enough to land that. And here's where I'm at. The best job I've ever had. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's when you factor in the amount that the company cares about you and the amount of compensation you get. I've never had both of those that were satisfactory at the same time.
All right, let's get into some of the specifics of what you do. Again, David is the communications and marketing director for the city of St. George in the state of Utah. Let me start with this. Is your work more geared to tourists coming into town, or is it more geared toward the residents who live in town?
It's more geared to the residents.
Okay.
There's the county kind of does, it's called Greater Zion. The county does the marketing to the outside folks. I'm kind of in charge of communicating mostly to our residents, to a degree the visitors, but mostly I'd say 95% residents.
Okay. And then I'm sure that no week is similar, but if you were to take what might be a normal week or a normal month, give us an indication of some of the different hats that you're wearing, some of the different projects, initiatives that you're doing for the residents.
Yeah, so I would say that there's the majority of it can be split in the 2 ways. One is social media. We've got our platforms at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn that we post on. And strategizing content, creating content, those kinds of things. That's a big chunk of it. Also, press releases, media outreach is a fair amount as well. As I mentioned, when I worked at the Spectrum, it was a really good paper. When I was there, unfortunately, I was kind of the first round of several layoffs, and there's still a daily paper that goes out, but there's really nothing local in it. So because of that, the city, we basically, and of course our stuff gets in the St. George News from time to time, but we basically, I look at my department as the news agency for the city of St. George. And so, we put out the press releases, the social media, we reach out to the media that is here on different, sorts of events. So that's kind of the majority of it. Obviously, there's other, the internal communication part of things. There's working with the city manager on his message, the mayor on her message, and just a little tip out there: if you ever see a publication that has the mayor's message written, the mayor didn't write it, and it doesn't matter which mayor. They don't have time. You get PR flacks like me that do it. So there's there's that. There's also you get pulled in because your communication. You get pulled in on different types of initiatives. Whether it be road safety, whether it be public safety, things along that realm. Our budget campaign last year, we did a campaign to try to make our budget more transparent. And so they utilized our services. We have on my team, we have a webmaster / multimedia person, and he gets a lot of great drone videos. And then we've got the guy that handles our eNet and builds some of our software things. We have a graphic design part-time person, and we got a couple of interns that really do awesome work for us. And the public access television channel that we kind of pay into, and they sometimes help tell our stories. And so there's a fair amount to juggle on a day-to-day basis. I never realized how much public speaking would go into this job or any job. You get a fair amount of it, and I actually like it, which would be shocking to people who only knew me in high school that I would not only have to do a lot of public speaking, but actually genuinely enjoy it.
This leads me to what's become one of my favorite questions for this podcast. Is the School of Journalism and Media Studies has a slogan that is, "We create storytellers."
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the story that we're trying to tell. What is the story that you are trying to tell for the city of St. George? And how do you go about telling that story of St. George?
Yeah, so I think it all kind of boils down to our twin pillars, which are activity and optimism, right? That's what we try to espouse in everything we do, whether it's in our messaging to people, it's in our in our communications with the media, with the public that come in. We always try to tout those pillars. And we're an active community. People come here because they love the outdoors. They love hiking and biking on our trails. They love golf. They love pickleball. Pickleball is so big down here. I mean, we have a complex that has 33 courts, including a championship court. Yeah, it's like one of the biggest in the West. It's crazy. So it's conveying that, like that activity, that optimism. People are here. St. George is perennially the fastest growing city, among the fastest growing cities in the U.S. I mean, I think we're always in the top 10, and it's been this way since after the Great Recession, and even a little bit before that. People move to St. George because they want to be in St. George. They like the lifestyle. It's a safe community. That's another story we're trying to tell. We're a safe community. We have good people. They like to volunteer. They like to be a part of things. And so that's the story we've got to tell. And the challenge is we have so many stories to tell. Mm-hmm. That is the biggest challenge. If you were in a city that had reached full build out and their population was a little stagnant, there might not be a whole lot of stories to tell. It's kind of a same old. But we've got so many stories to tell. That's kind of the biggest challenge that I face is we've got a limited staff and so many stories to tell. In fact, one of our council members sent me the contact information about a guy that he sees someone in his neighborhood. He goes out on his own picking up trash every day, and because the trash company will only pick up the trash at an address, he has to take that trash all the way from the area that's a vacant lot where it's at. He has to haul it over to his house and set it there. So the trash, I mean, just things like this. So we've got really cool people here, and we want to tell their stories. And so that's really exciting thing. And it feeds my, what I am at the core, like you said, a storyteller, something that I feel like I'm going to be for the rest of my life.
This next question I'm going to ask is a little bit along the lines of ego, right? Mm-hmm. I think that, for you and I, we grew up watching sports, reading sports, playing sports, and it was, there's a little bit of ego that's involved. Like, hey, I'm at the Daily Aztec, I'm covering this football game, right? Or maybe like, I'm covering the Chargers, I'm covering the Padres or something like that. Like, hey, I'm a part of this thing, this, I'm using air quotes here that David can see, this cool thing that is sports. Yeah. When you think about what you do now, what's maybe an example of something you go, you know what, I'm just really proud. It's one thing when you saw your name in the newspaper, what's something you go, you know what, I did this with my team and I'm really proud of the impact that it had.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thinking about that, it would probably be it would probably be when we brought a Gold Star Families Memorial Monument to St. George at our historic town square. So it's a little background on that and me and how I got involved. So back when I was at the Spectrum, I'd always had an interest in World War II. My tata, my dad's dad, he fought in World War II, and that's actually how he became a citizen of the United States. He was born in Tijuana, and he lived here. Then they get deported, and you go back, and then they come back out, get deported. So his service in the military allowed him to be a citizen, and really it was a game changer for the Cordero family going forward. And so I'd always had an appreciation of veterans, and so I started writing about World War II veterans. Even when I was the sports editor, I would do it kind of on the side. So doing that, I kind of got involved with Utah Honor Flight, and I kind of became one of the people that the community looks at as being really supportive of veterans, someone that liked to be involved in veterans causes. And so our mayor was friends with a lady. She was a Gold Star widow. Her husband actually was the mayor of North Ogden. He was also in the National Guard, and he was actually killed in combat operations. And so they had a Gold Star Families Memorial Monument built in North Ogden that his widow, she spearheaded. She's just a bundle of energy. I mean, she's probably the Crystal Fambrini of Gold Star widows, right? Just won't take no for an answer, and so she got it, and she wanted to bring one down here to St. George. And our mayor at the time, Michelle Randall, was really excited for it. And so she asked me to be on this committee. And so as a committee, we had to raise money because we didn't want to sink tax dollars into it. We wanted to be a community effort into this. And so I was kind of in charge of all the communication and, the press releases, the interviews going forward. And I'm also proud to say I helped secure some money. I actually fundraised for it. I wasn't just the comms guy, I actually fundraised for it. And then we had a great dedication of it. Just really, really touching that I was honored to be the MC at. It was really neat. And then kind of one of the highlights for me, just being a World War II buff, was there's a gentleman. He was actually the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II, Herschel Woody Williams. It was his idea to start this foundation, and he was in bad health, so he couldn't be at this event, but he called in, and I remember just listening to him on the speakerphone as he was talking to the mayor and others, and I thought, oh man, this is really cool. And so that was just really really a touching event. Made us all really kind of emotional, just to see. St. George has about 100,000 people, the county about 190,000, and we had over 100 Gold Star family members there, and that's wild. And you would think, well, how's there that many? Well, it's not just those that are KIA in battle. It's also people that have unfortunately taken their lives as a result of their service. So unfortunately, there's a fairly high degree of suicide in military veterans. So just being able to be a part of that event and helping to create a space where Gold Star families can go and just to think about their loved ones, that was really, probably I'd say a highlight of my experience here in 6+ years at the city.
That is an extremely cool story, and I like it a lot. And I appreciate the callback of a guest from a few weeks ago, Crystal Fambrini. Yeah. Well done there. Well done. A couple more topics before we wrap things up. And I want to get into advice for college students here. Knowing what you know now about what newspapers were, and then what's happened in newspapers and how hard it is to get any of your messages into newspapers. Mm-hmm. For the current students today, for journalists right now, what are the types of skills that they should be focused on, that they should really make sure that they know these types of skills that will help them, whether it's marketing, whether it's communications, whether it's sports writing, whether it's public speaking? What are the types of skills they should be focused on?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is, as you mentioned, public speaking. I think that's going to be important for a number of reasons. One is that, you can't just hide in print anymore. There's always going to be some sort of aspect, whether it's, voicing a certain part of the article in your news, whether it's a little bit of a stand up, a little bit of talk for a video version of your story. So you got to be able to speak in public, feel confident doing so. It's one of those things you got to fake it till you make it almost.
Mm-hmm.
You got to just have that, try to have that confidence and then repeat, do it over and over and over again until that confidence becomes real. And so public speaking is huge. And then networking. I wish I really understood the value of networking when I was in college. One story I want to tell you is that my last SEPA, right? It was we actually hosted it. It was in San Diego. And our sports section, we won. So there's 4 categories. You could have 2 entries per category, right? So 8 total categories. We won 7 awards. So all but one received some sort of award. And I think we got first in 3 of them. So 3 of the 4 we got first. So that was huge, right? Because as far as I understood, we'd never done that before. And part of me was thinking, this is sort of like, hey, I just had a great performance at the Rose Bowl, and the general managers are going to come and flood me. I'm going to be a top draft pick, and that wasn't the case. They don't have time to do scouting to find you, and I had a couple of contacts. I had you, and I didn't use that contact as well. I had Travis Lindquist. His dad had worked. I think he worked maybe at your the papers that you were at the time. Was it Ange, A-N-G, or?
Yep. It's now Bay Area News Group, A&G newspapers.
Yeah, and and then Kevin Olivas. Did you know Kevin?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was involved with the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, NAHJ, and I didn't leverage those connections. And even when I got into, I got to Logan, and even when I got to the Spectrum, I just wasn't leveraging those connections. I wasn't networking well enough. And it wasn't until I actually left the sports writing realm that I really kind of realized the importance of the networking and getting to know people. And it's huge. And I'll give you an example of how it's been big for me. So the last 3 jobs I've gotten, I have either known all or most of all of the people in the interview room, all 3. And so I was 3 for 3 in those jobs. And the reason being is that, we'd all love to think that, when a place hires someone that they're really hiring the person with the most skills and the best ability to do the job. That's only partially true. They want someone who can do the job, but they also want someone that, hey, they're going to spend 40 hours a week with them, maybe as often as they're going to spend with their spouse. They want someone who is pleasant, who is normal, who they feel like they can work with. And so having known those people, having built that network up, having known them, they realize, hey, David's a good guy. We'll give him this chance, even though he hasn't sold anything in 20 years, right? So, and so networking is just so huge. And when I speak to groups of college kids, sometimes I'll do that at Utah Tech. I spoke to the young professionals of the chamber last week, actually. Networking. Whenever you get a chance to meet people in the business world, do so. Make the connection. Ask how you can help them, right? Because networking isn't about, hey, what can you do for me? It's what can I do for you?
That reminds me that I forgot to ask you this question earlier about your time at San Diego State.
Yeah.
You did not just work at the Daily Aztec. You also worked where you picked up the phone and you called alums in order to try and bring in money for the university. And so tell us about that job, and in particular, another Daily Aztec sports writer who you happen to call.
Yeah. And so, at the time it was called the SDSU Annual Fund. And so I can't remember how I got a job there. I know, that first fall semester, I had stopped selling Cutco knives, did vending at Qualcomm. And the whole reason why I got into that was so I could watch the Padres in the 98 playoffs.
Right.
So I got to go to every game in the playoffs. So that was kind of cool. But that has started to dry up, and I need more funds. And so I answered an ad in the Daily Aztec, of course. Saw an ad for the SDSU Annual Fund. And so basically, you're in this call center and you're with, a bunch of other students, which is kind of cool because I met some friends there, including Audra Stafford, who's now with Channel 10 in San Diego. You'd be there, and the way they have it set up, I guess they have it set up because they didn't want you to goof around, but it would be auto dial. So you call somebody, and as soon as that was done, it'd count down like 5 seconds, and it would dial the next person. And basically you're calling them to ask for money, to ask for donations. When you're brand new, they give you what they call non-donors, right? People who have graduated from the school, but have yet to donate money. And the reason why they do that is they figure, well, you can't screw that up. They're already not donating anything, right?
Right.
And so they let you kind of hone your craft a little bit, try to get some conversations going. And I can't remember if she was on the non-donor or if she kicked a few bucks out once upon a time, and I got to talk to her. But it was Joanna Schmidtke, now Joanna Grossman.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't know anything about her, but when her name came up, there was a little section for notes, and I saw it said wrote for the Daily Aztec. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So do I, because I was writing for them at the time. So maybe it was February, March or so. I called and started talking to her, and this, Sush, you've been friends with her for 30 years, but just super engaging and fun to talk to. She was, and when I told her that I wrote for the Daily Aztec, she's like, oh, wow, yeah, it was so great. So you really need to meet Josh Sushan. Like he is like the godfather of the, and so I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I've heard of Sush. I've heard from Mark Garcia. He's told me all about him, and so she was like, here's my number. If you ever need anything, here's my email address, and let's stay in touch. I think Sush is planning a Daily Aztec reunion in the fall, because this must have been March, because I think I had just been named the sports editor for the following year. So I think that's kind of where that was. And so really cool. Of course, I get invited to this reunion, and it was a ton of fun. And it was all because of the annual fund. And I feel like the annual fund, it also helped me get kind of out of my shell. Because I wouldn't say I was like still super shy, but I was still a little bit shy. Mm-hmm. And just having an opportunity to talk with people, 3 nights a week. In fact, one guy I talked to, this might have been the oldest person I ever talked to at that time, but this was in 1999. He was 104 and he was a coach. I think he was a sailing coach or a crew coach at SDSU in the 20s. This is like the heyday of crew, right? Because you look at Boys in the Boat, it was in the 30s. This guy was, I think, in the late 20s, was a crew coach. And I remember I could barely, understand him. He said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm 104. I'm like, oh, gosh. Like, I feel bad for calling. He was probably like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. But it was kind of cool.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it all so much. This is just outstanding. All right. We could keep talking for a long time. David and I might. We're going to be at the Mountain West Conference tournament here in about a week or so, hanging out as well. But anything else that I did not ask you about that I should have, that you just want to add before we wrap up the conversation here?
Yeah, I would just say one person that I feel really grateful for. He's one of my best friends, and we'll see him at the Mountain West tournament, and he doesn't get a lot of pub, because he doesn't like a lot of pub. He just kind of likes being that ink-stained wretch, as he often says. But Michael Klitzing, Mike, he was, it was funny when I was a sports editor in fall of '99. We would advertise frequently for sports writers, and we needed about 3. And the funny thing was like I always hired, like, everybody who had a pulse, who wanted to do it, I would hire them. Maybe that was your experience too. But I remember Mike, he had provided this mock story, right? We give him some facts, some quotes, and we say, hey, we just want to see where you're at. And so he gives me this mock story. It's like 1 paragraph, and it's terrible. And I'm like, I can't hire this guy. And long story short, a month or so goes by. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty desperate. I'm going to call this guy and see if he'll join. And I'm not kidding you. He actually became, by the time he was a senior, he was writing better stuff than I did when I was a senior. Like I would say he is a better writer than me right now. That's for sure. He has been just an awesome friend. That Northwestern gig I talked about, like, he was the one that set that up, because he was working there. And I think that gave me valuable experience in the PR field, and maybe indirectly helped me as I transitioned to a different profession in life. So just a shout out to Mike Klitzing for doing great things. He works at SDSU now. He does. I think he's the international communications specialist, which means he gets to fly all over the place and spotlight awesome alums for the magazine.
Love it. I love all the Aztec love. This was fantastic. I learned a lot of things. I knew a bunch of things, and I learned a bunch of new things about you in this podcast, David. So thank you so much for all the shout outs and for making us proud as an alum.
Hey, see you in Vegas.
Absolutely. That is David Cordero. Once again, he is the communications marketing director for the city of St. George, Utah. And yes, I will see him in Las Vegas as we bring home another Mountain West Conference tournament title, hopefully. Right. I'm your host, Josh Sushan. Thank you for listening. Go Aztecs. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person, or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.